Hey, this is Brent Jensen. You're listening to No Sleep Till Sudbury, the show where we talk about the music that makes your skin vibrate. The show is brought to you by Pariah Pickups, quality handcrafted guitar pickups made down in Detroit City. They're doing some great stuff down there. Check them out. PariahPickups.com. Joining me on the program today is the legendary Canadian classic rock and roller, Greg Godovitz. Greg's latest book is called Up Close and Uncomfortable. And he had a lot of great stories for me, going all the way back to Toronto's Yorkville scene. Check it out. Greg Godovitz, thanks for joining me today, man. I appreciate it. How you doing?
I'm all right. I'm just sitting out in the back of what we call our office here, and I'm feeding the squirrels.
Nice. How's the weather out there?
Yes. I haven't been out. I mean, the squirrels look cold. They're shivering away out there, but I've been.
They're outside. You're inside.
Yeah, and I got the big bag of nuts, and they get, what they get, but they become friends with us.
Oh, that's cool.
I just hope they're not in our roof eating our wiring up there. So.
That could be. You never know.
You never know.
So, Greg, thanks a lot again for joining. Anybody who knows anything about classic Canadian rock and roll knows that you are a pillar of that community. You've got 57 plus years in the industry. I think you've seen it all, haven't you?
If someone had told me back in 1964, when I first picked up a bass guitar, that I would have had this life, I would have went, yeah, right. I mean, even the Beatles didn't think they'd last longer than a couple of years. And here it is, 57 years later, and I'm still bloody doing it, So somebody said to me, you picked the right job. And I said, yeah, well, I picked the right life job, I said, I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. And as it's turned out, it's the way it looks like it's going,
Yeah. Well, I'm a Goddo fan. And we'll talk about your new book, Up Close and Uncomfortable, in a second, but I think this leads into that. Before Goddo, you had played in a number of bands, the Pretty Ones, you were in Flood. You were mixed up in the Toronto Yorkville scene for a little while.
Yeah, well, the Pretty Ones was, that came out of grade 9 in 1964. At that time, I was the only guy in the school that had a Beatle haircut.
Okay.
And of course, that caused a lot of problems because I remember, getting punched in the face by a grade 13 when I was 12,
Oh, wow.
13, just for having the long hair. But I met Brian Pilling in my homeroom.
Mm-hmm.
He had his hair all quiffed back in the day. It was a bit greasy. But, we hit it off instantly. And then they had a day called Twerp Day where the seniors could, mess with the grade 9ers. And Brian showed up with his hair combed down, with the grease washed out. And the two of us went running across the field behind W.A. Porter, pretending we were the Beatles in Hard Day's Night. We fell down and he says, my brother's coming back from England and let's get a group together. So we started, and then Ed came back from England. I think I was 13. Ed would have been 17. He showed up at the restaurant Rendezvous in Scarborough, and he was 2 hours late because the bus drivers wouldn't pick him up.
Oh, because of his hair?
Because he had longer blonde hair. He'd been living in England. He had that Brian Jones cut going on, and they wouldn't pick him up. Meanwhile, Brian and I had been sitting in this restaurant waiting for him, and we never realized because we were so excited that they weren't serving us.
Wow.
I mean, it was really like that back then. It was crazy, There were certain areas you couldn't go because people would wait and beat you up. And I mean, it was crazy. And then they went back to England the next year at 66. Mm-hmm. I was only 15, so I couldn't go. And then Brian and Ed went to England and joined up with Cat Stevens.
Oh, wow.
So that's when I went into my blues phase. I answered an ad in the Toronto Star, singing bass player wanted. Well, I happened to be able to do that. Mm-hmm. So I called the guy up and he said, how old are you? And I said, I'm 16. Because I thought it made me sound older, Yeah. And I ended up joining a band with these guys, John Bjarnason, who's still a friend of mine all these years later, Dave Wood, Wayne Wilson, which was called the Backdoor Blues Band. Okay. And these guys would eventually become Whiskey Howell, which was another great band, And they taught me about Chicago blues. They said, those songs that you like by the Rolling Stones, they didn't write them. So at 15, I got this incredible crash course in Muddy Waters and Junior Wells and John Lee Hooker and all the great writers,
Yeah.
And then we got into the Yorkville scene, playing down in the bars down in Yorkville. And then I joined a band some of the guys from that band, we ended up in a band called Sherman and Peabody.
Yeah, with Gilmore from Triumph, right?
Gil was in the band. Buzz Sherman was the singer in the band, who would go on to be with Moxie. So, I mean, there was a pattern developing. I was always playing, even as a kid, with great musicians.
Yeah.
You know? I'm not going to say I was one, but, I held my own, and I was learning fast.
Neil Young and Rick James, the Minor Birds, were playing. Was that around the same time in Yorkville?
Oh, yeah. We used to see those guys all the time. I mean, when I finally moved down to Yorkville, I was living in one of those old mansion houses on Admiral Road, I think $30 a week for a room.
Wow.
And then people stealing your food out of the fridge. It was like a communal thing.
Yeah.
It was great because, we hang out in Yorkville, on Yorkville Avenue every night. And of course you had all those great clubs, the El Patio, the Flick, the Minor Bird, Penny Farthing, the Riverboat. And the Riverboat was the big one because, we'd sit up front. It was only like $2 or $3 to get in. But first part of the week, it'd be Joni Mitchell. And then the next part of the weekend would be Neil Young. And then it would be Sonny Terry and Brownie McGee and Chris Christopherson the next week. And then Junior Wells and Buddy Guy. And I think I only ever got to go in there once to see Junior Wells. Because we just didn't have the money to do it back then. And the place only held about 100 people. Yeah. But we always sat out front. And even though we didn't know who Joni Mitchell was or Neil Young at the time, you could tell these were people that were going someplace. I mean, they just had that it,
Yeah. That must have been a tremendous thing to be a part of, man.
Well, it was an incredible education, I mean, the Poppers were there, and Skip Prokop played drums in the Poppers before Lighthouse. And Skip was always really, really kind to me. Like we had questions to ask, and he was like an adult, and he was a couple of years older and stuff. And he was in a band that was really doing something. We were just, starting out. But he always took the time, and it taught me a valuable lesson myself, is that the way he treated me was the way I was going to treat people that talked to me about once I achieved some sort of success. And I never forgot that,
That's great.
Is the mentoring thing for people because, I've met other people that I consider heroes, and they just basically fluffed you off, and that sticks with you,
Oh, for sure.
It was great when you met the good guys and they taught you things about the business,
Yeah.
So after Sherman and Peabody, I got into the psychedelic era.
Okay.
And I was in a band called the Mushroom Castle, which still had some of those guys from those first two bands in there. And Eddie Schwartz was in the band. So for people that don't know, amongst all the great songs, probably his most famous is Hit Me With Your Best Shot, which he wrote for Pat Benatar.
Yeah.
So that was the other thing. I was getting to also hang around with guys who were really coming into their own as songwriters. And then the Pillies came back from England, and they put Flood together. I was sort of finished with the Yorkville scene for one reason or another. We were all splitting up and going our separate ways. And I went to see Flood at Midland Collegiate in Scarborough.
Okay.
And they had a bass player. I said, Jesus, I would really like to join this band. And they unfortunately got rid of the guy that they had. I ran into him a couple of years ago in Calgary. He still wasn't pleased about it.
Oh, wow.
Anyway, that's another story. But then things started really developing because Brian and Ed had become great songwriters. And then we had a string of, Adam Mitchell from the Poppers came out to produce us, and we suddenly found ourselves in San Francisco at Pacific Recorders with Adam and Fred Catero, who was like an absolute legendary recording engineer. He'd worked with Santana and Barbra Streisand and anybody that came out of the San Francisco scene. I think I found out recently that Moby Grape was recording at the same time as we were.
Oh.
We didn't know. I mean, because I met Don Stevenson. He lives in Toronto now, the drummer. And I read a book that somebody had written about them, and I went, Jesus, we were in the same studio at the same time. Wow. Fred, I guess, was bouncing back and forth in between sessions. But you know what? Here I am, I don't know, 19 years old. We're on a jet to San Francisco. There's a limousine waiting for us. Guy from the record company gives us $100 cash US each. Go have a nice night, boys. You get to work tomorrow. And then we spent 2 weeks in Sausalito recording the first Flood album.
How cool is that?
Heady stuff, And then the records, Turn 21, took off at radio. Then we recorded in Toronto, and we did Get Up, Get Out, and Move On, and Brother and Me. Then we went to England. I'd seen an ad in the New Music Express for a new studio called The Manor in Oxfordshire.
Okay.
and it was Richard Branson's place.
Oh.
I showed it to the guys, and the next thing I know, we're recording at the Manor. Like a month later, we're over there. We're the first international band, or band from outside of England to record there. Mike Oldfield was there recording Tubular Bells,
yeah.
which I actually burned a little piece of the score one day by accident. Yeah, not. Graham Bond showed up from the Graham Bond organization. Had Jack Bruce and Ginger Baker was in the organization. And I would jam with him at nighttime playing guitar. Jorn Anderson, the great drummer, John in those days, from Flood would play drums. I'd play guitar because I had that blues background. I know 3 chords, three licks. And Simon, the engineer, would play bass. And then one night, Graham was he was sort of down on his luck, so he was basically there and living off what we were doing, eating with us and stuff. Of course, I was in love with it because it was Graham Bond. I knew him well. Mm-hmm. And then one night he listened to the early takes of the Flood album and said, "Who's the bass player in the band?" And they said, "Well, Greg is." And he goes, "What? Him that plays the guitar with me at night?" So he took me aside and said, "Look, I would like you to stay in England. I'd like to put a band together around you." Ah. And I demurred. I said, "No, I got to go back. I'm young. I can't stay in England. I don't make money." And about 2 months later, they found him under a train.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. No, they claim it was suicide, but they found half of him facing up and the other half facing down. And apparently that's some sort of satanic kind of way to go. And he was really into that black magic stuff. So I'm sort of glad I didn't stay in England.
No kidding.
Because I might have been with him.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. Jeez.
But, great stories, and fortunately for me, even, all the stuff I've been through, trying to kill myself all of these years, I remember all of them,
Yeah.
And why not? Because they're exciting, they're good stories.
Oh, absolutely. And that is a great segue into your new book, Up Close and Uncomfortable, right?
All right.
When I say that you've seen it all and done it all, I mean, this book really backs it up. I was reading, somebody called it a graphic depiction of the music scene as it was back then.
Yeah, that and more. I mean, if you look at it, Travels with My Amp, the first book, it was nothing but music. Mm-hmm. When I got requests from people saying, "When are you going to write part 2?" Because Travels went from 1964 to 1984. So it was really just the first 20 years of my career. Mm-hmm. So I started to write the next bit. And I just realized after like 150 pages, this is just more of the same, and it's boring me. So I shelved it. And then I started going through my computer and finding these short stories that I'd written for some reason years ago. And I decided to take a different tack. I had nothing about my real early life in the first book, but my early life, like working downtown when I was a child and stuff, was as crazy as my adult life. Mm. My father had a smoke shop at Yonge and Dundas. My older brothers would take coffees and danishes to the businesses around there. Yeah. And my mother was a coat check girl at the Friars Tavern. Oh, wow. Which became the Hard Rock, which is now Shoppers Drug Mart.
So sad. Yeah.
So by the time I got interested in music, and my mom was working at the Friars, I would go every Saturday afternoon, and I'd be sitting with Levon and the Hawks, Wow. And they took an interest in me. And I remember it was Rick Danko. I told him I wanted to be a drummer because this is just before I started learning how to play. And he looked at me and says, "You've got bass player hands." Oh. So the next thing he did, of course, was sell my mother a Trainer bass amp, which he got for free. And I wish I still had it because it was a hand-wired Trainer Bassmaster head and a 15-inch cabinet. Oh. And the serial number was 0003.
Oh, wow.
So, man, every time I go into a pawn shop, I have a look. I'm hoping it comes back to me,
Yeah, no kidding.
And other people I met, Ronnie Hawkins there, 40 years later, I'm his band leader. Yeah. I meet David Clayton Thomas there. I was a kid, these guys were all making records and they were all really cool.
That's so great to hear. It just sounds like such a great scene was happening.
Well, it was insane, because I was really interested in it. And I knew I was going to be a bass player because, even though you had Robbie Robertson and Levon and those guys playing, it was always the bass player and the sound of the bass that I went, yeah, you can hear it through everything. So that's what I want to do, Mm-hmm, and of course, I love McCartney.
Oh yeah,
like everybody of that age. So I had stories like that I wanted to tell about that era, and also other things. Like I wrote I wrote a story called The Sinister Scout Master.
Okay.
This is when I was 11, and we used to go on these week-long or weekend jamborees, I think they called them. But this guy was a psychopath. Like he would get us to sharpen spears, and then just like the movie The Naked Prey,
Mm-hmm.
he would throw a spear as far as he could. He says, "When you get to it, I'm after you. Don't let me catch you."
Oh, wow.
And he would come and hunt us down. I mean, it was.
Jeez.
But we had a pact amongst the pack saying, should we tell on this guy? No, he's way too much fun to go away with. It was like Survivor for real. So I added some stories like that in, and I haven't had one complaint of like, how come there's not more of this or that in the book?
Yeah.
I wanted the book to be, as I think I put in the forward to it, Kurt Vonnegut's my favorite author. He wrote a great book called Slaughterhouse-Five.
Yeah, know it.
The main character was Billy Pilgrim, who becomes unstuck in time. So he drifts back and forth all the time. And I said, just consider me, if you know the character, I'm the Billy Pilgrim of this book.
Mm.
I'm going to jump around in time. It's not going to be chronological like the first one. And I was happy with the way it turned out because you know what? It worked. It's funny. And to release a book during the pandemic that makes people laugh out loud, to me, was mission accomplished.
Yeah. Well, we could use a little bit more of that, certainly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's great, man. Up close and uncomfortable. Eddie Kramer actually said about the book, be prepared for extra underwear and a box of tissues if you're going to read it.
Well, for those that don't know who Eddie Kramer is, if they're listening to your show, I'm sure they do. He's the famous South African engineer that went to England and worked with Jimi Hendrix for his whole career, still works with the Hendrix Foundation. Yeah. He also did, 2 Led Zeppelin albums, 4 Kiss albums. He worked with Traffic. He worked with the Beatles. He worked with the Stones. And he lives in Canada now. In fact, him and his wife took over the house I finished writing the book in.
Oh, wow.
In Picton. They came down to visit me, and we went in Prince Edward County to the wineries and stuff and had a great week together while I was writing. And then when I finished and came back and COVID hit, they wanted to get out of Toronto. So we helped them out, and they moved to Prince Edward County. Lucky them.
That's cool. Wow.
We become great friends. I mean, he remixed from scratch the very first Goddo. At some point, I'm going to put it out on vinyl in the next year or so.
Nice.
Eddie and I'll sign it, but it really sounds tremendous. I mean, I engineered produced the first Goddo album, and it didn't sound anything like what we really sounded like. But all of a sudden, Eddie comes in there, and the kick drum sounds like John Bonham, and the bass actually sounds like it's got some oomph to it, So you got my little 20-year-old voice singing over Led Zeppelin.
Cool. I look forward to hearing that. That's awesome. So in addition to Up Close and Uncomfortable, which is out now, you've got a new book, a third book in the works.
Yeah, well, we can't play. There is no music business at the moment and for the foreseeable future. So I thought instead of just spending all of my time drinking and doing interviews, I would start working on a new book because I realized that when Up Close and Uncomfortable was finished, I had very little about the 8 years I spent in Calgary and then coming back to Toronto. So I've got like another 15 or 20 years worth of stories. So I thought to myself, I'm writing a bloody trilogy here. And some people will go, oh, you egotistical goof. I mean, you're so high on yourself. But the stories are about us. They're not about me. I mean, they're about everybody. Everybody can relate to these stories. Mm-hmm. Having thought that it was a trilogy, the first thing I wrote down was the title of the book, which it's working title, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to keep it. It's called The Idiot's Trilogy, Part 4. So once again, there you go. I mean, you're laughing at the title. And I've written about, I don't know, maybe 50 pages. I was reviewing it this morning, and I was actually laughing out loud. Now, there is COVID stuff. I mean, I can't get away from the COVID thing. So I started out writing about what we're going through. And then it'll go back into me going from Toronto to Calgary, where, I had extraordinary adventures out in the West, meeting all these legendary Western musicians and playing with them and getting to know them. And then recording a bunch of people out there. For some reason, I had an aptitude when I got to Calgary for recording female artists. Mm. So I did 8 albums out there for chick singers, songwriters. And the best one of the bunch is a gal named Amy Bishop. She was a Calgary girl. She ended up on that show, The Launch.
Yes.
And she didn't win it. but they had Nikki Sixx as one of the judges, and the kids that won it were a heavy metal band. So, geez, I wonder who's going to win this show. But I've never heard a better singer in my life than Amy Bishop. We did a Christmas album called Bells, and she recorded Hallelujah. Everybody does, but I called up Oscar Lopez, who I met out there. Oscar's a world famous flamenco guitar player, and I said, Oscar, I'm recording this gal who I don't think you know, but what's it going to cost me to get you to come in and play classical guitar? $3,000, amigo. I said, you'll do it for $300. Okay, I'll be there. So he comes. He heard her sing, and they did a duet of her singing Hallelujah with him. You can hear his jewelry rattling on the classical guitar. And then he starts jamming with her. When he does this solo, it is phenomenal. It's actually what got her the audition for the launch. Best voice I've ever heard. Wow. So we did. That was on the Christmas album, and I said to her, I said, I've always wanted to produce a Christmas album, but I don't like when you've got, the first song is a traditional, Oh Holy Night or something, and then the next one is Feliz Navidad, and you go, the whole mood is ruined here. So I said, let's really choose the songs carefully and make an album that two people could sit Christmas Eve with a glass of champagne in front of a fireplace with the candles going and not have Feliz Navidad come on. To me, it's the best Christmas album I've ever heard. It doesn't matter if I was involved with it. It's really good. And it's called Bells if people want to find it. And then we did, she wanted me to do her next album, which I was very happy about, that she wanted to work again, of her original pop songs. We went into a studio out there, and I started calling all of the top-notch musicians in the Calgary area. And they all came in, and we made a pop album. Every song sounds different. Much like my production on the Goddo albums, there's no two tracks that sound the same. I mean, my voice sounds a bit similar, but I like to sort of keep everything fresh, like my writing now. Yeah. So I had a lot of fun out there recording people, and then, of course, discovering the natural wonders of Alberta. You've got Badlands where the dinosaurs are. You've got these canyons that look like they're out of a Steven Spielberg movie. And I would go exploring these bloody things. And it was something that I'd never done in my touring days. It was an eye-opener, It was a growth curve,
Yeah. Life-enriching experience for sure. Banff, those mountains. Unbelievable.
Phenomenal. Everywhere you go an hour in any direction from Calgary, you're going to find something that blows your mind, Plus, the people are great. They had a great music scene. I met Gay DeLorme out there. Finally got to know him, and then he passed. And a couple of other my great friends, Doc Bromley, incredible mandolin player. He just passed away recently, and another guy named Bill Dowie, who has also left us. That was the worst part for me of the COVID thing, is that I wanted to go and say goodbye to my friends, and I couldn't do it, I talked to them on the phone, but it's not the same thing as giving them a hug and a kiss and sending them off,
Not at all.
But they'll all get their due in my new book, because there's going to be a lot about my years out in Calgary, and then returning to Toronto and getting involved, with the Almacombo restoration, meeting Eddie Kramer. There's a lot left to tell. I never ever thought I'd ever be a writer, but there you go,
That's fantastic. So now when can we expect that third book?
As Michelangelo said to the Pope, when it's done.
When it's done, it's done. No book will be released before it's time.
I said to my wife the other day, I said, if I can do 5 pages a day, I'll have this book ready for this Christmas. I'd like to have it out for this year, too. I mean, we don't know what's going to happen. I mean, I never know what's going to happen with me any day. I mean, I'm going to be 70 in March, and I still have got the same mindset I had when I was 13,
Oh, good for you, man. I like that.
Yeah.
I like that. The title of the third book, I was going to suggest a play on the third verse is the same as the first.
Actually, that's good, too. That's really good.
I've always loved that. It's sweet. I heard that for the first time, and I would listen to it over and over again and laugh. I just thought that was so great.
That is actually a good alternate title. I dummied up another title page that said, the #1 New York Times bestseller of all times. Yeah. but all the S's were dollar signs. I thought maybe I can get away with it like that. And then you turn the page and it goes, or the Idiots Trilogy Part 4. So I'm going to check with my lawyer to see if I can get away with doing the #1, New York Times bestseller of all times.
That's great.
And I think because of the dollar signs, I might be able to squeak it by. But I write the stuff and I read it and I'm laughing out loud. And I go, if I'm laughing at my own stupid jokes, someone else is going to get them.
There you go. Yeah.
So we'll see what happens.
Perfect. Well, I look forward to that coming out. All right, shall we get into your tunes, sir?
Yeah, if you wish, yeah.
You've got 5 great ones here. So we're going to kick it off with the Beatles, Here, There, and Everywhere from Revolver.
For Paul McCartney, it's one of the best songs he ever wrote.
Mm-hmm.
The structure of the song, I did a songwriting course in Calgary, and the structure of the course, it just starts rising, you know?
Yeah.
It just keeps going up and going up and going up, and then it starts going down and going. I mean, it's the perfect structure for a pop song.
Yeah.
And not only that, I mean, the playing on it is fantastic, and as usual, his vocal is amazing. And it's a great sentiment. I mean, it's a romantic song. I mean, every time I hear it, I go, man, I wish I'd written that one, man, because that's an incredible love song. I mean, it really is. He wrote it about Jane Asher back in the day when he was going out with her.
Yeah.
And it's probably my favorite Paul McCartney song for sure.
I was asked a couple of years ago that dreaded question, what's your favorite Beatles song? And that one came up right away just because that ascending melody is just so perfect. And so, you know, it
is.
Considering the entire scope, Greg, of the Beatles catalog, this is definitely up there at the top.
Oh, yeah. I mean, they wrote hundreds of the best songs of all time. They go down in history the way that the great writers, Gershwin and Burt Bacharach and Mozart and all those guys, they're going to be part of that forever. Long after we're gone. I mean, they're still going to be around.
Agree.
And it is. You hit it on the head. It's a perfect song. Perfect pop song.
It really is. Yeah. The Kinks, Waterloo Sunset next. This is a good pick, too.
When I had my radio show, Rock Talk, I could pick out who I wanted to interview that week. And I happened to know that Ray Davis was in town doing a one-man show down at the Danforth Music Hall. So I've been to see it, called his record company, said, can I get an interview with Ray? So he was staying at the Harbor Castle. I went down with the technician who was going to tape it from CFRB. And Ray wouldn't let us into his room. So he had his people bring a couch out into the hallway of the hotel. I expected as much from him, you know. And I really prided myself on questions, you know, like on really digging deep, because I've been asked questions before. I know what a lousy question is.
Yeah. If
you get a lousy question, you're probably going to give a lousy answer. But he sat down. I had to stand up while I was interviewing. And he was pretty aloof. And I was asking him these great questions, and he was giving me one-word monosyllabic answers. Yes, no, dunno, maybe. And I thought, he really doesn't want to be here, until I said to him, you know, Ray, I've always regarded you as the Charles Dickens of rock and roll. And that's when that famous, the little smile, really? And I had him right there. How do you say that? I said, well, look at Waterloo Sunset. You know, for instance, how you describe the scene, you know, of Waterloo Sunset in London. I mean, or the one, Dead End Street, you know, crack up in the ceiling and the kitchen sink is leaking. Yeah. Now he's in. Now he wants to talk. I mean, you tell someone they're the Charles Dickens of anything, they're going to pay attention.
That's a good point.
And I had him.
That's true.
Next we talk about the humor in his songs. He goes, so he's smart. He wants to see if I know my stuff. He goes, where do you see humor? I said, there's humor through most of your songs. I said, Ducks on the Wall from Soap Opera really springs to mind. And he starts singing, my baby's got the most deplorable taste, but her biggest mistake is hanging over the fireplace. And I start singing Dave Davis's part. She's got ducks on a wall. And I'm singing harmony with Ray Davis.
Oh, wow.
Which for me was just like one of those moments, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
And after that, we were like bosom buddies, you know, and we talked for like, I think an hour longer than we were supposed to.
Yeah.
But, you know, Waterloo Sunset was just when Terry meets Julie every evening, you know, Waterloo Station, you know, I mean, it just conjures up such a romantic, you can see them. Mm-hmm. When you can write a song that you can see, yes. You know, you close your eyes and you can see where they are. You're a powerful songwriter.
It was originally called Liverpool Sunset, I believe.
Yes, I know. Yes, right. Yeah. Everybody tried to cash in on the Beatles, right?
Well, yeah, that was it. Like Ray said, I guess somebody asked him about it, and he said, Liverpool's always been my favorite city. I was a big Mersey guy, big Merseyby guy, and I just eventually changed it because it just didn't work. to Waterloo Sunset.
Oh, and then of course he could get Terrence Stamp and Julie Christie into the equation as well.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So it made perfect sense. Yeah. Great song in my top 5 for sure.
Yeah. On the Liverpool vibe still, the Beatles from Rubber Soul, In My Life is next.
Well, if Paul's ultimate song, in my estimation, is Here, There, and Everywhere, then In My Life is John's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I figured out how to play it years ago, and it's a staple. Actually, both of these songs, when I do my up close and uncomfortable one-man storyteller show, I always make sure I slide both of these songs in. Once again, an incredible chord progression in the song, and the use of jazz chords and going from majors to minors. I mean, really, really clever stuff. Now, you have to wonder how much of an input George Martin had on arrangements and stuff. The Beatles were, well, all three of them, the guitar guys they had incredible chord knowledge because of the songs they covered back in Hamburg.
Yeah.
Of course, you've got George coming in with the sped up harpsichord solo in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
You have to, I mean, he was pretty hands-on with their music, especially in the early days before they realized that they really didn't, they didn't need any help.
Mm-hmm.
John would write Strawberry Fields. Paul would write Penny Lane.
Yeah.
My Life was a real song about the people that he'd left, the people that he'd lost, the people that he loved. It showed a very, very tender side to a guy that I think on the same album, if I'm not mistaken, I think Run for Your Life is on that album as well. You're talking, I'd rather see a dead little girl than to be with another man. But still, I mean, they had that working class Liverpool men's attitude to women. And then you get Here, There, and Everywhere from Paul, which is about as lovely as you can get. And the same thing within My Life.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Next, you've got the Beach Boys. God Only Knows. Great vocal harmonies in this.
Yeah, great vocal harmonies in everything they ever did.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Now, even though Brian wrote it, he was smart enough back in those days to dole the song out to the boy that could do the best job, and Carl Wilson sang lead on it.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was one of the songs when McCartney first heard Pet Sounds. That's the one that freaked him out, and he went back to John and said, "We've got our work cut out for us here."
Yes, yeah.
And it's just another one of those songs where melodically it's just so far above the norm. Chord progression, I mean, it's not like the standard songs of the day. There's no Moon, Spoon, and June in any of this stuff. It's all well thought out lyrics and wonderful arrangements. And then, of course, Brian's production techniques, the way he used to add, he used Christmas bells a lot in his records.
Mm-hmm.
Which I always thought was a fantastic idea because nobody did, unless they were making jingle bells, nobody used Christmas bells, but he loved to add that kind of stuff to songs.
Yeah, well, he added all kinds of things that you just think, like, who the hell's idea was that? Like that in Good Vibrations, what is that thing called?
It's a theremin.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw them do it live.
Oh, did you really? Wow.
Yeah,
wow.
it was a live show called Beggar's Banquet. It was out in like Downsview Park or something. I was in Flood back then.
Wow.
And I remember Bread played on it, that great pop band Bread.
Mm-hmm.
And the Beach Boys played, and it would have been the year that Good Vibrations was the big hit. And Mike Love played that theremin part, which is a tricky thing to do, but he had it nailed.
Yeah.
And the other thing that Brian Wilson did a lot too was he used bass harmonicas. The things are about 2 feet wide. And then like a foghorn.
Yeah.
And he would layer them, and I mean, he was a really innovative guy. Or let's open up the lid of the grand piano and get a guitar pick and take the guitar pick across it and mic it, I mean, and it taught guys like me a lot of stuff about how records were made. I mean, I had a lovely chat with Eddie Kramer last week about I'm going to go back in and work with a band called 3/4 Stone. I produced their first album a number of years ago. And this is when Pro Tools first came in. I had no inkling of what it was. And I remember standing out in the tracking room with Danny, the singer, and we were doing harmonies.
Mm-hmm.
And it took us about an hour to get the harmony right on the first chorus. We finally did it. We did it a couple of times. It sounded great. And I said, okay, run us ahead to the next chorus. And we open up our mouths, and this guy, all of a sudden, there's the vocals. And I said, whoa. I said, what's that? He goes, I cut and pasted it and flew it in. I said, what is that? He goes, well, I took that section you just did and put it in this section so you don't have to do it again. I said, well, hang on a darn second. I said, we don't make records like that. Well, now that we've got it, we're going to start doing it again now. And this chorus will be stronger than the first one. And the next one will be stronger than the first two. And exponentially, this song will grow in stature until we finish it.
Mm-hmm.
I said, that's the way I make records. And Eddie said, he says, oh, old school. And that's right. I mean, I'd say we're going to do a backwards guitar solo on this. Well, now you could hit a button and your guitar solo is backwards.
I know. It's just, there's no craftsmanship involved in that,
I mean, first of all, we're recording in the guy's basement studio, which was quite a studio. I actually took Eddie out there about a month ago. He says, this guy's got this in his house. But, I said, let's not dog it. I mean, we got a 1/4-inch tape. Let's record, flip it over the way the Beatles did it when they first did it. Flip it over, try to log it in, or do it again, or do it again, or do it again. We're not on a clock here. We're not paying for studio time.
Yeah.
And basically taught them, listen to how natural your record sounds now instead of it being cut and pasted everywhere, or pushing a button.
Right.
I hate that stuff,
Yeah, the warmth is lost in those things.
It is, and it's also the trial and error aspect of it. That's like when you finally nail it, when the engineer lines up the tapes and all of a sudden that backward solo comes in perfectly, you go, listen to that, we did it.
And not to mention, Greg, the happy accidents that
that's what we called them, happy accidents.
Yeah, just all kinds.
That's what we called them.
Yeah.
I love that aspect of recording.
Yeah. So the Rolling Stones is your last tune here. Time Is on My Side. And I think this is on 12 by 5, right?
Yeah, it was.
Great.
Another song that I've been playing. I've always had a British invasion band in the background. My last one was out in Calgary. It was called the Dick Clark 5. There was four guys in the band. So instead of the Dave Clark 5, it was the Dick Clark 5, which is funny. Actually, a friend of mine came up with the name, and I said, that's great. But we get to a gig, and after the first set, the club owner would come over, as they do, and he goes, so where's the other guy? I go, what do you mean the other guy? He says, I hired the Dick Clark 5. I said, that's exactly what you got. Well, how come there's only 4 guys on stage? I said, because the name is a joke. Dick Clark, Dick Clark, American Bastard, yeah. Dave Clark 5, Dick Clark 5, 4 guys. It's funny, haha. He says, well, the joke's on you because I'm only paying you for 4 guys. I said, well, you're only going to do that once because everybody's really digging us and we ain't coming back unless you pay us once. And we always got paid. But those songs, especially the early Stone songs, I know nearly all of them.
Yeah.
We used to do Off the Hook. We did all the weird ones that people wouldn't think of doing,
See, that's cool.
If You Need Me, That's How Strong My Love Is.
Wow.
But Time Is on My Side was always one that I went. I mean, that was probably as close to a Stones hit that we ever did because we were going for the deep album tracks.
I love that.
Same thing with the Kinks and stuff. We would do All Day and All of the Night and You Really Got Me, but we could also throw in something like Lover Not a Fighter or something,
I'm a huge deep cuts guy, Greg. I love that. Love it. I've had conversations, endless about this, about the power of deep cuts and going through. Stones are a great band for that too, because, you go into albums like Beggar's Banquet. Or,
my favorite.
Exile, and past all the hits, right? And stuff like Live With Me,
Yeah. Stray Cat Blues.
Yes.
I've always wanted to do that one. I mean, first of all, it's naughty, but what a great riff in that thing,
Yeah. That's where the real gold is.
No, Time Is on My Side. I'm pretty sure, I'm almost 100% sure that they didn't write it. That was a cover for them back in the day.
It was. And it's a funny story. It was written the year before, but there were 2 versions of this song. The Stones covered it, I think, in 64, and it only had an organ intro, and then they did another version where they changed the arrangement a little bit and added guitar, and that's the one that you hear.
Yeah, there's that lead guitar solo off the top over the organ and stuff.
Exactly.
And I know that. Yeah, I probably got both of them. But it was great. I mean, that happened a number of times. There was a girl that put out Go Now just before the Moody's version came out. Because the Moody Blues were from England, hers just got dumped to the wayside. And, of course, Denny Lane got the hit with Go Now. So that happened a lot. They were black artists that were making these songs in the first place. And then you got these white long-haired kids from England coming out while the mania was going on. And they got the hits out of them.
The Rolling Stones' greatest trick was that they sold black American music back to Americans, really.
Yeah. And you know what I really love the most about that era of music, especially with the Stones, is Jagger must have been playing that tambourine when he was doing the vocal because it's right in the lead vocal pocket.
Yeah.
Same as the maracas when he was playing them. people had forgotten the art of recording percussion instruments. It's a big part of my production because I remember when you heard that, on the floor, and it was like bathed in the same echo that they were using on his voice. The tambourine was a lead instrument in the bloody song.
Yeah, absolutely. Stone's recordings are full of that stuff. Just
Totally.
Again, going back to Happy Accidents, you hear a chair squeaking on the floor, or Jagger's voice cracks on Exile. I love that stuff.
Yeah, for sure. Eddie told me some great stories because he worked with the Stones when Brian Jones was alive.
Mm.
And he had nothing, even though, Brian was a very flawed individual as a human being, and the drugs and all the rest of it that finally took him. But Eddie said that he was the guy in the band. He says, you'd walk in the studio, there'd be something lying around. He would pick it up, and within 2 minutes, he could play it.
Wow.
So he would do that with marimbas. He would play saxophone. He would play recorder. He'd play dulcimer. He would play sitar. Yeah. I mean, he was one of those guys,
Wow. Well, he brought the sitar in for
Painted Black.
Painted Black, right?
Great footage. And of course, Harrison had already done it because of those Indian musicians hanging around on the set of Help. Mm-hmm. That's what got George. I actually have in my basement, I have a sitar from the same place in New Delhi called Ricky Ran, where George's sitars came from, and Ravi Shankar's.
Oh, wow.
So it's like a Stradivarius. I mean, it's like, I can't play it, but I have it sitting in the corner on top of an old Vox Essex bass amp, and it sure looks cool.
Nice. That's awesome. Well, Greg, thank you very much for this chat. I really appreciate this, man. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you so much, Brent. It's been a pleasure to be here talking to you about all this great stuff, and let's do part 2 some other time.
Yeah, absolutely. Guests come on multiple times often because you can't just bring 5. I'm sure you've got a million more songs that we could talk about. So
a million. So everybody out there, wash your hands a lot. I washed my hands so much during the first wave of COVID, I could see through the skin.
Oh, God.
I am not kidding you. I just called in my gal and I went, I can see what's under my skin.
Wow.
So we've sort of knocked that off because I was going through that. I got to wash my hands every 5 seconds here, but it does detract from your skin tone. Yeah. So wear your mask, stay distance, eat your vegetables, and we'll see you at the next Goddo gig next year.
All right. Greg Godovitz, thank you very much. The new book is called Up Close and Uncomfortable. Thank you so much, man. I'll talk to you soon. All right?
Yeah, mate. Thanks.
Take good care. All right. This has been No Sleep Till Sudbury with Brent Jensen and my very special guest, Mr. Greg Godovitz. Till next time, folks. Take good care.
Brent Jensen is the best-selling author of No Sleep Till Sudbury, Leftover People, and All My Favorite People Are Broken. All titles available in stores and on Amazon worldwide.